This is Behind the Mic with Kirkus Reviews, where the subjects are audiobooks and the actors who narrate them. I'm Jo Reed, and joining me today is a young readers editor from Kirkus and a regular contributor to Behind the Mic, Laura Simeon. Hello, Laura.
Hi, Jo. Thanks for letting me come back. I appreciate it.
Of course. And if you're here, I know we're going to be talking about books for young readers, / listeners.
Indeed. Although they're too good just to be listened to by young readers. I think a lot of adults will enjoy these as well. I've got 3 middle grade titles this week. Phoenix by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley, which is read by Emma Ladji. The Lovely Dark by Matthew Fox, read by Karise Yansen. And When Tomorrow Burns by Tae Keller, which is a multi-cast production.
So tell me a little bit about these books and why you wanted to talk about them.
So these are fantastic because they're books that help kids work through some, difficult situations that come up in life. They talk about death, divorce, climate anxiety, gender roles, other kind of, intense topics, which is actually why I think they're great for adults as well, because sometimes, we have these rose-colored glasses about childhood as this carefree time, but really, kids, everything that adults experience, kids do too. Things that affect families, affect, children, their classmates. There's no clear, bright line between, adult worries and childhood ones. And I know adults sometimes there can be discomfort about what's appropriate for kids. And so much of it isn't, I think, the subject matter, but how we talk about the subjects. So if you don't let kids have age-appropriate, exposure to treatments of sensitive topics, then they learn from other sources, peers, things they pick up in the media, online, and often those aren't delivered with their best interests and developmental needs at heart, which is why I think books written by caring middle grade authors are so important.
Well, we're beginning with Phoenix by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley, and it's read, as you said, by Emma Ladji. So tell us a little bit about this.
So this one is about 11-year-old Harper, who is dealing with a lot. She's got parents who are splitting up. She's moving away from her best friend. She's entering a new school, and she rescues an abused horse.
And, okay, I'm cutting to the chase immediately. The book does deal with animal abuse, but let's discuss it. I mean, and I don't mean to detail it in this discussion, but how appropriate is that for young readers? I seem to remember when I was a kid, and I swear I'm still traumatized by this, all the suffering animal stories that somehow people thought it was appropriate for young kids, which I'm here to tell you was not appropriate for me. So tell me a little bit about Phoenix, because I know Kimberly Brubaker Bradley is a real horse person as well as a prize-winning children's author.
Yes. I mean, people probably know her most for Fighting Words in the War That Saved My Life. She's Kirkus Prize finalist, Newbery Honors, Odyssey Honor, Honor 2, all this. She is also in real life a horse person, and this book has so much authenticity, and it's actually based on a real horse she rescued, or her daughter rescued, and so it's very well informed, and it's also very careful in the sense that the violence that the horse experiences is all off page. You meet the horse afterward as he's being nursed back to health. But I think it's not one of those, the dog dies at the end books that rip your heart out. It's like,
or in the case of Bambi's mother in the middle of the film.
Oh my goodness, but I think the thing that's important is that kids do see animals suffering. They lose pets. They hear these stories, but how do you make sense of it?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes something that's upsetting is not necessarily bad. A teacher I worked with, he said that one of the most pivotal moments for him as a child was his teacher was reading them Where the Red Fern Grows and started crying and had to stop reading. And that to him is like, it was this light bulb, like, wow, books can have this impact, even a child's book on an adult. And so I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to wrestle with in a way like bibliotherapy, maybe. But in this book, you have this child, Harper, who she's figuring out a lot of things like, is she afraid of horses, or is her kind of domineering BFF who is afraid of horses the one who planted that in her head? You know what I mean? She's sort of figuring out, where do I start and where does my friend end? Same with the situation that brought her in contact with the horse in the first place, which is that, and again, this is handled so delicately, her father had an affair with her best friend's mom, which also a reader who's not ready to take that in, it's so oblique that they might not fully grasp it, but a kid who has lived through that, and sadly, kids would get it. She's adjusting to moving, which is very common, financial strain, also something, that a lot of kids experience. But the thing is, the book is very short and it does a lot, but it never feels overstuffed. It's really deft, delicate, sensitive handling that also really would help kids work through or develop empathy for someone who is going through it.
So it seems that Bradley is very deliberate about suggesting, for example, the cruelty and its effects without dwelling on shocking imagery. And the focus stays more on Harper's response and the rescue effort, and Phoenix, who's the name of the horse, and Phoenix's recovery.
Yes. And also developing that trust with Phoenix. Phoenix is wounded physically and emotionally, and Harper is very much emotionally wounded. And in a lot of ways, they sort of rescue each other. It's this really lovely story that also shows it's very well informed and accurate. I was a horse crazy child. I read
As
only
was I.
horse books. Yeah. And there are a lot of inaccurate horse books out there, and also a lot that are very narrow. And one thing that I love about this book is very naturally incorporated is this diverse group of kids at the barn. And you understand the world through their eyes. It's really, I would say this book is a masterclass in showing microaggressions in a way that it would be clear and understandable if you're 8, but also a lot of adults could learn from it. There's one of Harper's new friends is a Puerto Rican boy named Dante. And, this white woman comes in, assumes he's a groom, and Harper's thinking, but he's a child. Like, why, he's a fellow writer. Why would you assume that? And a lot gets unpacked, but again, not in a like, here, kids, let me teach you about this kind of way.
Not in a pedantic way.
Not at all.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think Emma Ladji does an extraordinary job distinguishing a fairly large cast. There are many characters in this book with subtle shifts in rhythm and tone rather than exaggerated voices. And I think her restraint fits this novel perfectly, especially as Harper begins to form new friendships with kids like Dante.
Very much so. And one thing that's interesting, because the book's written in the third person, Ladji, she's not trying to do a childlike voice, which, we often have in middle grade that's first person. And I felt like it was like this warm hug, that's very warm, reassuring delivery, where you feel like this is this calm, comforting adult who is sort of guiding you through this story. And I think just really always hits the right note.
Why don't we hear a little bit? Do you want to set it up?
Yes, let's listen to this clip. This is when Harper and her mom are driving into their new town. They've left the city. They are shocked by their first sight of the country, which is dead chickens hanging from somebody's clothesline.
This is Phoenix by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley, and it's read by Emma Ladji.
Welcome to Summer Springs, Tennessee, she thought, where chickens watch their friends die and wonder if they're next. Her stomach flopped sideways. They'd already driven through what passed as Summer Springs downtown. It had been exactly 6 blocks long, without a highway or shopping center or Starbucks in sight. Knoxville, where they'd come from, was a real city, a normal city, where they'd lived in a normal subdivision among people who didn't hang butchered birds in their yard for all the world to see. Harper's best friend, Kat, who had lived across the street from them in Knoxville, wouldn't have cried over the dead chickens. She'd have made a joke about chickens trapped in a chicken horror movie, maybe, and probably it would have been funny. And Harper might even have laughed. Harper and her mom had not only moved away from Knoxville, they had also specifically moved away from Kat. from Kat, Kat's house, and especially Kat's mom, and Harper's dad. Nothing about Harper's life felt normal now. She wondered if it ever would again.
I think that was such good direct writing that sums up a complicated situation clearly and with compassion. And I love the way Ladji delivered it because it felt. It seemed felt, not read.
Very much so. Yeah, it's a really lovely production.
All right, so that is Phoenix, and now we're going to move on to, what's your second book?
So my second book is The Lovely Dark by Matthew Fox, which is read by Karise Yansen. And this one's about Eleanor. She's a girl from London who's mourning the death of her grandmother from COVID. And the two of them were very close. And Eleanor drowns alongside her best friend and ends up in the afterlife.
Okay, I'll just start. What stayed with me most about this book was how physically tangible the afterlife feels. Like, even if in its strangest moments, the book is so full of ordinary textures, like vegetable gardens and damp tunnels and boarding school routines. And for me, it made the emotional stakes feel much more immediate and also much more believable.
Yes, it was filled with this lyrical, poetic language, but it never felt kind of overwritten or, too complex or taking itself too seriously. And there were just so many lines that were just, I had to share. I wrote a couple down about the pandemic. The world outside shrank, the world inside grew to fill the space that remained.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
And I was thinking,
well
because yes, kids who would be reading this, for them, the pandemic happened when they were toddlers, maybe kindergarten, no, very young. And how do you explain all of it? And I felt like so concisely, Fox just shares that experience of what was it like to live through lockdown. Oh, and you said, yes, the afterlife. I also wrote this sentence down. It was dusk, but I could see the dull silver line of the river curling through the valley. Between the house and river, there were vegetable patches, rows of potatoes and carrots and broad beans tied to sticks. It's heavenly, but it's also mundane and real. It's beautiful.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I really like Carise's narration. I thought it was very understated throughout. So let me just ask you, how much do you think that grounded, almost conversational performance contributes to keeping this story emotionally accessible rather than overwhelming for a young listener?
I think you actually nailed it. I was thinking about how she has this beautiful voice. It's very pleasant. It's delightful to listen to, and it's very calm, measured delivery. And I love the English accent. It adds this sense of place, but it's not going to pose a barrier to comprehension for US listeners who may be less familiar. And the story, it has these magical elements, but she doesn't do it in this way that's, overly dramatic and that would take you
Right.
out.
Yeah, she doesn't oversell the mystery.
No, no, and you're sort of it's almost taking you by the hand and walking you alongside, and it's dealing with these big topics like, losing a beloved grandparent and dying yourself and wondering about your family, being separated from your best friend because after they get to the underworld, Eleanor and Justin, there's a fork in the road, they part ways. And they're trying to find their way back to each other. I have to be careful, not too many spoilers, but it's a lot of things that could be extremely alarming and stressful, but again, things that affect children's lives.
Okay, I have another question for you since you're our young reader editor. I think this book asks middle grade readers, listeners, to sit with grief and uncertainty for quite a while. And do you think the fantasy framework kind of makes these ideas, these heavier ideas, more approachable for them?
I think so, because it's a lot to digest, even as a grown up. This existential dread. It's like, grief is one of the hardest things that, touches everybody's life in ways large or small eventually. And I think when you put this sort of magical spin, it's very cleverly not tied to any specific faith system as well. So it allows young readers, whatever they believe or their families believe, to kind of explore the concepts around loss and missing people and wondering and connection and, so desperately wanting to still speak to people who are no longer with you or check on people you've left behind. And I feel like it's a safe way to explore it while also not losing any emotional impact.
Well, can we hear a little bit now?
Yes. So this is one of the earlier eerie things that happens where they're on the tube, the subway, the underground in London, and Justin points out to Eleanor that there's a doppelganger's girl who looks exactly like her, down to her clothes, her backpack, everything.
So good. Okay, this is The Lovely Dark. I love this title. I just want to put that out there. And it's by Matthew Fox, read by Karise Yansen.
Cold water ran through my insides. A hand seemed to grab my stomach. "Hey!" said Justin, knocking on the window again. The girl who looked like me didn't hear Justin knocking, although the passenger sitting opposite her looked up from his newspaper and frowned. "Hey!" said Justin again. The girl who looked like me kept staring straight ahead. Justin knocked on the window again. "Stop it!" I said. "Please!" Justin looked at me. "Are you all right?" he said. "You look a bit—" "I have to get off this train," I said, and stood up. And as soon as I was on my feet, there was a jolt and a momentary blink of darkness, and then the train, our train, started moving, pulling away from the other train, and I saw the girl who looked like me glance at her watch, and then she was gone, and I had no idea what had happened, and who she could possibly be, if not me. A moment later, I heard Grandmother's voice in my head. "That," she said, "was a fetch."
I think the writing here is evocative and really enticing. It just draws you in. And I think her narration is really, really terrific.
Mm-hmm.
She's so attuned to the novel's pacing, and there's a gradual unfolding of a mystery rather than constant action. And she gives those quieter moments enough room to breathe. And I really think it really suits this story so well.
The pacing, I'm glad you mentioned that because it's such a refreshing change from, stories that bombard you with, and I think it's really important that there are all kinds of stories out there for all kinds of kids and all kinds of moods. But the other thing I appreciate about this book very much is that it respects young readers' ability to work out unfamiliar words and context. They did not Americanize the text. We have cagoule and tannoy and all, words that may be unfamiliar, but you can either figure it out or you can do what a lot of kids do because they're constantly encountering words they don't know. You skip over it, you figure it out later, look it up, ask a grown up. Mm-hmm. But I like that. I think it's very respectful of young readers.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, both of these books, as does our third book now, When Tomorrow Burns by Tae Keller. All three of these really do have so much integrity in the way they have an enormous amount of respect for the young people who are going to be reading or listening to them.
Very much so.
So tell us about this, and it's a multicast. Who's narrating?
Yes, When Tomorrow Burns by Tae Keller. It's read by Eddy Lee, Annie Q. Riegel, Sara Matsui-Colby, and Emily Woo Zeller. And this is another book along the lines of Keller's Newbery Medal winner, When You Trap a Tiger. It sort of gently blurs that line between fantasy and reality. So you have this trio of friends, and they've been bound together by this old book of prophecies, and they're struggling with all these new challenges in middle school that really threaten their bond and their future relationships.
One thing that I found fascinating about the ensemble casting is, and I don't know if this will make sense to you, but all four narrators feel stylistically connected, even while they're giving each character a distinct emotional texture. And I think that can be hard in multi-voice productions, especially in middle grade, where that tonal consistency matters so much.
Yes, yes. The one thing I remember popping into my head as I was listening, I was like, wow, they are so distinct. I never had any question of whose point of view chapter this was, but they felt like they would inhabit the same universe, which is also hard.
Exactly, exactly. So we have Emily Woo Zeller, and she is the trees. Tell us a little bit about each character here.
So you think about, what do trees sound like? and you know, and in this case, it was so perfect. The trees, it's sort of these interstitial sections, they feel really grave and timeless. The trees have always been there and they will be there. And you just love that, the stability of it. And Riegel narrates Nomi, and Nomi is a force to be reckoned with, very determined. And the delivery is very sweet and earnest. And I felt like it almost softened the edges, not erasing that aspect of her personality, but humanizing her in a lot of ways, which was nice. And then Lee narrating Arthur, there's a sort of lightness and some buoyancy to the delivery. And you sort of remember, like, wait, Arthur, he's just a kid and he's dealing with big, serious topics, his tiny shoulders. And that was helpful, as a sort of reminder. And then Matsui-Colby as Vi, very measured, deliberate. You feel how overwhelmed she is. This is a kid who's struggling and she's tired and she's trying to make the best of things.
I think this novel captures that. I don't know that it's particular to middle school, but maybe it is. That feeling that the world's problems suddenly become visible all at once.
No, and in this case, the kids had found this old diary that had all these really enigmatic lines and this very ominous final poem. And all along, as friends, it was sort of fun. It was this puzzle, like, oh, this prediction is going to come true. What does this mean? But this final poem, part of it is, a girl who burns, a boy who breaks. How do you turn a girl to flame? When canopies burn, you'll never be the same. And they're in Seattle, where I live, and we've had these terrible summers with wildfire smoke, and that's what they're experiencing. And they're struggling, two girls and a boy, and their friendship is not the same as it was. And there's a lot of, Arthur's dealing with this friend who is sort of like poster child for toxic masculinity, and he has two dads, and he's trying to figure out, well, what does it mean to be a man? He has a crush on Nomi. Vi has just discovered that her mom is this family influencer who's sharing content about her and her sister that comes as a big shock. She also has a crush on Lucas. There's a lot that this little trio is dealing with.
And I have to give a special shout out to Emily Woo Zeller, who voices the trees, as I said, which I thought of as a Greek chorus, weaving in and out.
Yes.
And I thought that could have easily tipped into something overly theatrical or overly abstract. But instead, the way she voices it, it creates this quiet sense of almost inevitability hovering around the story.
Yes, I thought the trees hit exactly the right note. They did very much a Greek chorus role.
Yeah. Let's hear a little. So who are we going to hear?
So we are going to hear Annie Q. Riegel, and this is a scene toward the beginning of 7th grade where Nomi, who likes everything to be in order, is feeling very disoriented by some changes.
This is When Tomorrow Comes by Tae Keller. It's a multicast, and we're going to be hearing from Annie Q. Riegel.
Nomi got off the bus to find Violet, as usual, scrolling through her phone, as usual, sitting under the old oak tree, as usual, the same one they'd sat under since 1st grade. And then Nomi actually did cease to breathe, because Violet looked different. and change always made Nomi's heart skip a step. Walking up to Violet, she searched for breath, searched for words. "Do you have a piano recital?" she finally asked, attempting to lighten her voice as she gestured to her best friend's outfit. Violet didn't answer right away, but that was normal for her. Unlike Nomi, Violet always thought things through about 6 times before she spoke. It was what made them a good pair. Violet's lips quirked like she was trying not to laugh, and she slid her phone into her backpack. Normally, she would have slid it into her pocket, but she couldn't, considering she'd swapped her everyday jeans for a pocketless pink skirt.
I think in this excerpt, we hear how Annie captures that unsettled, off-balance feeling of early adolescence so well.
Mhm.
You know, that slight hesitancy and kind of searching quality to her delivery kind of mirrors how disoriented
Mhm.
Nomi feels as the way she sees her friends it's beginning to shift a little bit here, and she can almost intuit what's going to be coming.
Yes, yes. You think the one constant you have is, at least I have my friends, but then when your friends are they becoming someone you don't recognize anymore, where does that leave you?
Yeah, it's like, excuse me, why are you in pink?
Pink with no pockets.
Pink with no pockets, the big one too. So that was When Tomorrow Burns by Tae Keller. As we both said, these are 3 books that, boy, did they respect their listeners.
And what I like is that there are touches of humor and touches of lightness. So it's not, they don't drag you down. I think it's catharsis.
Yeah, it's not gloom and doom all the time.
No.
Laura, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I always enjoy coming on the show.
Today's episode of Behind the Mic is supported by Blink, publisher of The Music of Us, a fun and flirty contemporary YA novel that tells the tale of a cat cafe barista and a boy band pop star, which hits all the right notes. The Music of Us is a laugh-out-loud, friends-to-lovers romance perfect for ages 13 and up, and the audiobook is available everywhere you want to listen. And while you're listening, why not listen to Fully Booked by Kirkus Reviews? Fully Booked is the podcast for book lovers. Every Tuesday, Megan LaBreeze brings you author interviews, industry insights, and recommendations from the bestseller list. Find your next great book on Fully Booked by Kirkus Reviews. You can follow Fully Booked and Behind the Mic on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, or wherever you get your podcasts. And then stop by kirkusreviews.com to check out reviews for both print and audiobooks. Behind the Mic is produced by Jessica Lockhart. Michelle Cobb, Stephen Cummings, Leslie Fine, Alan Minskoff, Alex Ritchie, Laura Rossi, Laura Simeon, and Kendra Winchester are our contributors. Jennifer Dahl is our editor with assistance from Alicia Langerman. And Tom Beer is the executive producer. The music is William Ross Chernoff's Nomads 4-Way. And I'm your host, Joe Reed. Good listening.